We're now going to enter the sort of the new scene, I suppose. Nothing like this existed with when my time with my daughter. So I welcome Tracey to introduce us to the eye gaze technology and Rett syndrome. Thank you very much, Tracey.
Thank you, Bill. Am I amplifying? Yes, I think we're good. Good to go. Well, I don't think I've come adequately prepared with my poo jokes, so sorry about that. I'll see what I can do. So for the majority of us, communication is something we value most highly. And to quote the vivacious Mary Louise, communication is the essence of human life. I think that's pretty much an accepted. And we hear so often that one of the key things we want for girls with Rett syndrome is communication. And of course, they all have significant communication and learning potential. And no doubt they're already doing loads of communication through their emotions and postures and actions and gestures, vocalisations, words, and AAC. If you're already on the path, who knows, we'll find that out today. And as there's many parents here today, all on their different places in the journey. And although no two Rett girls are alike, we often hear the descriptions of loving people, being so social and understanding so much. So we have a really great starting point, but it is the apraxia and dyspraxia that's a key factor which affects the movements and the development of speech. So Linda Burkhart, and Mary Louise mentioned her name. If you don't know of Linda Burkhart, she's an American, I call her an AAC guru. She's a teacher. She has fantastic resources, but she describes apraxia and dyspraxia. She says, imagine that your car is your body and you are the brain. And sometimes when you step on the brake, the car accelerates, sometimes it stops. Sometimes when you turn right, it might go left, sometimes it turns the way you're steering. And this is what apraxia feels like. I think that's a nice analogy. And apraxia is the inability to reliably connect thought to action, and dyspraxia is the same concept, but the signal gets through sometimes, or sometimes it's delayed. So no doubt you're all very familiar with that. But what Linda notes, which is really important for a lot of the progress to using various AAC and technology, is that girls with Rett syndrome may have lost or never reached a level of automaticity with motor skills. And it may require a great deal of cognitive effort to move. It may take thousands of repetitions for a girl to learn to use a switch, for example. We're talking about eye gaze in this session, and that's also a motor skill. And it seems to require, though, significantly lower physical and cognitive demands, and is therefore an easier form of access. And alternative forms of communication are being widely used with girls with Rett syndrome. So many of you, I know, have already heard a lot about eye gaze, and many of you are starting to use eye gaze technology. So we'll see actually what we're talking about here. Eye gaze technology, another Linda Burkhart quote, eye gaze technology is the perfect panacea to enable the Rett syndrome population to communicate easily and meaningfully in most situations, but it's not a magic bullet, of course. And Kathy has provided some references earlier that support this as well, and it's just amazing how suitable eye gaze is for girls with Rett syndrome. So introducing eye gaze technology can reduce the physical demands of other access methods while complementing other communication systems and developing independence. What we've learned is that it's never too early and it's never too late to start using eye gaze. We've had girls, women actually, try eye gaze who are in their 30s and have not had other technology prior to that. And we've had 18-month-olds, I think might be our youngest, around that sort of age, trialling eye gaze as well. So there has been quite a bit of talk, you might have seen some things in the media about eye gaze becoming mainstream and therefore reducing the cost. This has only happened in a very limited way so far, and I guess the principles in assistive technology are to work with what you have available now. If you're waiting for the next best thing to come along, developments invariably take much longer than expected, and we're always wanting to get hold of things as quickly as possible and work with what resources we have now. So the systems that we do have now for communication and assistive technology are specialised combinations of hardware and software, which, as always in our field, are used by a very small number of people, and therefore the cost efficiencies and volume production rarely apply, unfortunately. However, the good news is that in most states of Australia, the eye gaze technology and the eye gaze communication systems are funded through state government systems. Here in Victoria, it doesn't cover the full amount. If you're lucky enough to be here in the Barwon region and you're under the NDIS, then it will be covered if it's considered reasonable and necessary, which it would be if the person has complex needs. So Queensland is pretty much fully covered if you're eligible through the medical aid subsidy scheme. So every state is different at the moment, but that will change when NDIS as it rolls out, and hopefully will allow a broader application of eye gaze, because at the moment it has to be for communication, which is good in many, at least we have that, but not everybody is quite able to justify. You have to, put in your reports and have all the eligibility criteria met. So the eye gaze technology is really widely available in Australia now and well supported. We have access here to all the systems that are from America and Europe. So we're not being left behind. Don't worry that we haven't got access to anything here that other countries have. So a concern may be a reliance on eye gaze technology to the exclusion of other systems, but as Mary Louise explained, and so did Sally Ann. Sorry, Sally Ann. I was going to say Zoe. Sally Ann said too that we'll generally recommend a range of communication systems that are employed and not just one. And it's another addition to the AAC toolkit. We want to have as many options as we can available. So in the rest of my presentation today, I'll talk about the eye gaze technology and how to get started, what's involved, and the learning pathways. And in my 20 plus years specialising in assistive technology, what I valued is really the opportunity to work with a large number of girls with Rett syndrome in our eye gaze days, where they're using eye gaze for the first time, and it usually just blows everybody away. At the end of the day, it's always amazing, and we're mainly doing this in schools. And so I'd like to share with you and show how this happens and the pathways to this new access. So my disclaimer, I am a speech pathologist, but I do own an assistive technology company, and there's a few of us represented here today, but this is an impartial talk talking about just generally eye gaze and the various options that are around. So what is eye gaze and what are we talking about? This is an eye gaze camera. So it's just a USB device that plugs into the computer. There are about half a dozen brands on the market. So you've heard about the Toby brand has been mentioned a couple of times. This is a MyGaze, there's IntelliGaze, there's iTech, there's LC, there's a few others. That's basically what an eye gaze camera is, but on its own, it's pretty useless. Just like a switch. So many of you have possibly worked with switches, and on its own, it does nothing. You need it to, you're operating something else with it. So it's actually just a method to access a computer. So what we need is a Windows computer, not an iPad. They're not compatible with iPads. These eye gaze cameras work on the Windows platform, and so they may be connected to generic computer systems such as a desktop or a laptop or a tablet device, or it may be some kind of specialised device that is set up and designed to be a speech generating device, so it's all built together with the computer and the eye gaze camera in one unit. So there are three essential components to the eye gaze system, and I think it gets very confusing when people just talk about eye gaze and we're talking about it synonymously to mean communication or to mean something else. If it is just a computer access method, and then what we do with it can be a range of things. So we need our eye gaze camera. We also need software. So the software, the camera has its own software generally, and that must be installed on the computer. So it's kind of like a driver, but it may have its own operating centre and some other programs attached to it, perhaps for assessment and to provide other kinds of feedback. So the camera is quite a complex piece of equipment with its own software. And then there's the software that you're going to operate. So you could be playing some simple games, you could be using a communication display, or you could be entering data in a Microsoft Excel spreadsheet. All of those things can be done using eye gaze computer access. The third component is the person and the positioning, and this is achieved by usually a good mounting system, and you'll see we've got a few mounting systems out in the display area. So the camera has to see the person's eyes, and it has to be in a certain relationship to the screen and the camera. So if the person's lying down or reclined, then the camera and the screen will have to be positioned accordingly. So that's the final element that means that everything will be working reliably. So for girls with Rett syndrome, the eye gaze can provide access to a computer. It could be a communication device. It could be just for fun and games. It can be for education and communication. It can be for anything that you and I use a computer for. That can also be applicable to eye gaze. Communication can be speaking out a message using a computer voice or a synthesised speech. And these days too, it can be email or social media such as Facebook. So really, communication now, we're not just talking about the voice output communication. But the funding agencies that we work with these days are mainly talking about voice output communication. That's the guideline, that the device is for voice output communication. So just so you're aware of what you're applying for and what the limitations are. Again, with NDIS, shouldn't be an issue. You should be able to apply for whatever is in the plan that you've decided is an important goal. So the idea of using a high-tech system for communication is usually to provide voice output, and then we've got a means of initiating, communicating independently. Mary Louise talked about autonomy. So we have autonomy in our language and what is available to us in the communication display, but we also can have independence in the form of access, so they can do it themselves. A device can also contain extensive vocabulary without adding to the weight or the bulk. So I don't know, are many people here working with pod communication books? A few? Okay, so you've got nice big, lots and lots of pages, yeah. So that's great, and you've got your massive vocabulary, and in a device, of course, you can have as many pages and as much vocabulary as you like, and it's all there in the computer memory. So essentially anything that can be done on a computer using a keyboard and mouse can also be carried out using eye gaze input. So where do we start? Usually we'd start with a trial in a comfortable, no pressure environment. And we've had some girls trialling the equipment that's here today. Not necessarily distraction free, but it's an opportunity, so please take it up if you'd like to. So you'd want to have the equipment all set up, ready to go, no technical hitches, make sure it's all working, and normally we do that by testing it out on ourselves and make sure everything's set up and ready to go. No delays and no complications. I'll show a short video of the sort of software that we often start with, which is at an interactive learning level, so cause and effect kind of games. It's really just a starting point to get the idea of eye gaze. We don't want to complicate it with other goals at this point. It's like when learning a motor movement, and as we mentioned, you need maybe 1,000 repetitions for autonomy or automaticity to be established. And so after this there may be quick progress to other activities or even communication, but we start here and to get a real familiarity with the idea of controlling something with your eyes. Claude, do I need to? Thank you. Screen's a bit washed out there. It's balloons with faces on it. So that was just 3 quick games. There are dozens of the games in the suites available of software. So the first one we had, what was the first one? The splat? Oh, the video wall. Thank you, sorry. Video wall. So the video wall we quite like because what you saw that young boy learning is, oh, I look at it and it moves. And you can just see that aha moment very often. And there's a video wall with 4 videos, which is often what we prefer to use. You can put your own videos in there. So if we know ahead of time that there's a preference for One Direction or Taylor Swift or Wiggles, then we put those in. Or we might just put one of those in, and then that makes it a bit like a test, which we're not wanting to do. We're not wanting to say, you know, find the Wiggles or anything. It's really just seeing what preferences there are and a matter of exploring all the options and then going back, oh, that's the one I really like, I'll go back to that one and I'll stay on that, and look, I'm making it play. So it's a really nice task for that. The splat task with the photos is also one where you can put your own photographs in. And here we have just a single target on a black background, so it's more discreet. A lot of the activities have very different presentations, so we need to try a lot to see different preferences and if one type of activity suits better than another. So sometimes we have students with cortical vision impairment, and they quite like that one with the black background and just one very stark target. And that, we won't go into cortical vision impairment today, but that's another interesting area about what actually is meaningful to the person, what meaning are they gaining from what's on the screen. Again, you can put your own pictures in those, your own photographs in those cells, and that kind of worked for us one day. We had our notes before the session that this young girl with Rett syndrome liked One Direction, so we had we had animals and other generic people, and then we had some One Direction targets, and she would not splat the wonder. She just went stiff and looked away, and it was, why aren't you doing it? And we're thinking, something's wrong here, what have we done wrong? Oh no, she's not going to splat her heroes, so it doesn't always work to have your preferences there, but that's all something that we can do. The young lad chewing the chewy toy and using the fruit punch, that's called, that had moving targets. So that can be another type of target where if just the screen with the static targets isn't really all that interesting to start with, the moving targets can create a bit of, or attract attention. You can also cheat a bit because you can just sort of look at the one spot and just wait for the targets to move into that spot. So at the end of it all, you can get a bit of an analysis to see how much screen the person was covering with their gaze, and also see the areas where they mainly were focusing their gaze. So that's where we start, and then we progress on from that to other types of activities. And there's various strategies with girls with Rett that may be helpful during this sort of process. Sometimes might need to gently hold an arm or a foot so that just to allow that focus. The other thing is if arms come up, it can actually cover the way the camera can see the eyes. So it's sort of blocking the actual job that the eye gaze camera is doing. But mostly we just wait quietly and they work it out pretty quickly actually. So there is now a wide range of software available for starting to develop eye gaze skills and learning to control the mouse. And these sort of activities that you've seen, are graded, and some require additional skills. So that is the fruit punch over the other side. So you've got still fairly discrete targets on a black background. This other kind of eye gaze activity, this is a scene, and there's a whole suite of scenes, look to learn scenes and sounds, and these are quite nice actually, and a lot of the girls with Rett syndrome do like these. You look at the different areas, like if you look at the boy, he rides the bike. If you look at the apples, they drop off the tree. The girl on the swing swings. And actually I do know somebody who really likes one of these and makes her own little story about them. And I think that's the thing, you can make them quite interactive once it becomes just something that you enjoy doing together. It's not just target practice, which is kind of what it is at this level. The one at the bottom has panels down each side, the cells with bugs in them, and the idea here is you look at a bug and then you look at the place, one of those stars, so it's almost like a drag and drop. So you can see in terms of an eye gaze skill, we're doing something more now. So we started off with our fruit punch, we just look and splat, something happens, just the simple cause and effect. Then we had the video wall, where now I look for a period of time, I'm holding my gaze to keep the thing going. So we're learning to sort of hold, and that's called dwell when we get to sort of some later skills that are needed. And this is, a bit of a combination of skills, but there are different skills in actually the use of the eye gaze. It's not just looking at something. And so you can see it's a bit like if you've gone through the process of learning how to use a switch, there is a lot to learn, and there are different grades of using a switch. So the thing about using a switch is that if you've got a single switch and you're using it, how do you progress? Where do you go next? You probably have to learn scanning, so you probably have to learn to choose between a few different options, and that becomes a pretty complex skill, and now timed switch use is very crucial, or you need to be able to use two switches. So this is where eye gaze offers us something very direct, and we don't have that complexity, but we can progress through to numerous targets on the screen without the complexity of the access method. The access method doesn't become too much more complex, but there are these slightly different levels to progress through. But we find on the eye gaze days that we do that the girls with Rett syndrome become so engrossed and very focused on the activities, and they will continue using them for about 20 minutes at a time. Well, they'd probably go longer. We often have to tell them to stop and take a rest, please. Look, your eyes are streaming. This is your first time. They really just get right into it. And so mostly we say, let's take a break, give your eyes a rest. People can find that their eyes get a little bit tired first time, and certainly, you just need to be aware of that. And it is a motor skill to be learned, but generally we get great success in the first trial, but there's plenty of time to develop more skills. On these days, we're really just figuring out, does the eye gaze work for this person? Can they use it? Do they, is it worth progressing down this path? So many of the activities, as you've seen, are like target practice, but they're still fun and they are engaging. So they tend to suit even quite a wide range of ages. The Scenes and Sounds has got jungles and aliens and space rockets and things, so it really moves through to teenager and even older groups. And there are some real target practice kind of games, and we know some people who have moved way on in their use of eye gaze to communication or computer access, but they still like to play these games because they have a real score and it's something that they just enjoy. So you may have heard of paradigms such as eye gaze learning curves or eye gaze learning areas and so on, and these are generally about how the eye gaze is used, like cause and effect, and then moving through different categories. But to my knowledge, they're not really based on, they're really just a way to format and categorise the application of the eye gaze. So really what I think we always encourage people to do is look at what the software is requiring, the activity is requiring you to do, because there are some of these pieces of software that are in this early learning category. So you'll be going along doing these kinds of activities where you're just looking at a picture or looking at some targets, and then suddenly the next activity is find the one that's different. And like now, what have we done? We've introduced the concept of different. So we've actually made the task more complex. We're no longer just using eye gaze. That's something we will do down the path, but that's not where we're up to now. So the goals and pathways will be individual, and it's kind of interesting. This software is relatively new for eye gaze. It's been around for a long time for switch use and touch screens and so on. But eye gaze, if you think of the history of eye gaze, it was first used with people with motor neurone disease who were very likely to be very experienced computer users, and they had a lifetime history, world knowledge, language ability and so on. So it's only in recent years that we've really had access to this really nice software for eye gaze at this early, the interactive learning level. So it's really a matter of finding the activities to fit the individual goals and interests and the pathways, but analyse what the software is really asking or what it's requiring the user to do. So yeah, some of those, like a goal, like suddenly what's 2 + 2 or whatever, suddenly we're introducing maths goals. Well, where did that come from? Is that something you've actually been working on separately? Maybe it is, maybe it isn't, but if it isn't, then it's probably not an appropriate activity to be using. So there's ways to customise these activities, as we've noted, and we often put Tinkerbell and One Direction and all those people in them. But what we find is everybody gets very excited about this stage and wants to leap into communication. And Mary Louise showed us a pod communication display, and these are available on the eye gaze systems, on the communication devices. But this is a big leap from what we were just doing a minute ago with those cause and effect type activities. So moving towards this communication, we find that there's really a transition period where there's a lot of practice required with the method of access, and we generally work with errorless communication activities. These things have been around for years, and people like Caroline Musselwhite and Patty King-DeBorn, more AAC gurus in USA, have talked about these. But what we're doing the rest of the time, you'll be working with your low-tech communication and all the things you're already doing. We're working with learning eye gaze. So this is like a parallel paths of learning, and then at some point we start incorporating them together. So we'll have a look at a video to show some of these activities in a moment. But this just was to reiterate the point I mentioned before, that with scanning you do have to move to, or with switch use, you do have to move to scanning or multiple switches in order to progress and beyond just a single message or a single activation of a toy or an activity, whereas the eye gaze does offer us the prospect of moving ahead without that additional load. So we'll have a look at Charlie, and this is a young girl we met just a couple of weeks ago. And she will show you how brilliantly she did in her very first session of eye gaze. So we whizzed through some of those games, and then we just thought, let's get into some social interactive stuff. It's a little hard to see on the video. The target is white. So instead of the red dot that you often see, we've got a white dot in the middle of our grid 2. So we'll have a look at Charlie, and I think the picture will tell 1,000 words. Claude? Yep.
What? Show me what you do next. Student says laugh. Yes, I heard.
Foot on the camera. She's looking at Mum the whole time. She wasn't interested in Karen. Bit of a rub of the eyes. She's been going for 20 minutes by this time.
Student says laugh. Student says go to sleep. Oh. Well, that says good.
That's a long sleep, isn't it?
Shut up, Tracey.
You might nod off.
Student says dance.
Yay, dancing!
She's looking out afterwards.
Oh yeah, she's got it. You've got it. You're a great Simon, Simon says. Stopped.
Student says quack, quack it up.
You did it, Tim, We might try this. See, we've got one here.
Student says dance.
Oops.
More dancing.
So, apart from the dorky commentary and trying to get everybody in there doing it, you could just see, yeah, she just would have done that for hours. I think she was just right in there. And what you might notice there is now we've got a different piece of software. So this is the Grid 2. It's designed for communication. So before, in the other activities, the mouse sort of wafts around the screen. That's just mouse control. But now the eye gaze is the Grid 2 program is specially written for the different eye gaze cameras. It's all integrated. So what you see is you don't see any wafting dot anymore. She can look in any of those areas and it snaps to the centre of those cells. So it does make, it feels like so much more efficient, and it really assists the eye gaze. But that's then requiring a dwell time. So she has to stay in that, on that cell just until the clock face completes, and then we could adjust that dwell time, and we've got it down quite short because she's just a beginning user and she did brilliantly whatever we did. It worked for her, and yes, she just is now having her just completed her 2-week trial of her system, and that family will be going ahead to look at getting their own system. So she does have a low-tech pod, and that's what she'd be using alongside that, but I don't think she'd be far away from integrating her eye gaze access to a pod on a device. So in summary, and before I close, I hope you've seen how eye gaze can provide an additional means of access to communication for girls and women with Rett syndrome, and eye gaze communication system will complement the other methods of communication they're already using. We're not throwing those out, and it provides an independent method of access and reducing the effort for movement. So it's not the magic bullet, and it's not for everybody, but it's certainly worth a trial, as it may provide opportunities that were otherwise inaccessible. And to access the equipment and trial eye gaze, you could contact your speech pathologist or occupational therapist, teachers, or the suppliers directly. So the eye gaze technology almost seems to have been made for girls and women with Rett syndrome. The computer access method may be the way of the future, providing access to a wide range of activities, but most importantly, it can provide an avenue for independent communication. Thank you very much.